Here is 11 o'clock on my watch, so we'll go ahead and get things started. Welcome, everybody, to the webinar presented by PAN, Notarizing an Electronic World. My name is John Morenzel. I'm going to be Mark's sidekick today. This presentation will be given by PAN's president and CEO, Mark Aronson. So thank you to Mark for giving us some time today on this subject that PAN member service reps get a lot of questions on. So it's going to be, a good deep dive in some topics that we want more information on. So what we're going to talk about is the current state of electronic and remote notarizations, mobile driver's licenses and the impact on identifying your customer, and also the future of identity. So sit back, relax. We'll go over some topics and have some fun. Now, before we start, give a little quick intro. Myself, again, my name is John Morenzel. I am PAN's digital marketer. I've been with PAN for 10 years this month, actually. Time flies. I started with PAN as a customer service rep for a couple years. Then I became an instructor, and I did that for about 6 years. And now I'm our digital marketer. So I handle all of our social media pages, any marketing adventures that we might have with Google and our YouTube page, things on that nature. So I have my hands in a lot of different things. So that's a little bit about me. On the screen, you'll see myself and my wife, my wife, Cassie. Our anniversary was just 2 days ago, actually, 2-year anniversary. And our kids are over to the right. We have Lucas as my stepson. He is 11. And our daughter, Josephine, which she is 2, she'll be 3 in January. So it gives you a little, dive into my family. Now, on the mark, why don't you do me a favor, introduce this young lady?
Okay, and myself a little bit. So my name is Mark Aronson. I am the president and CEO. I've been here a little more than 52 years. That's not a typo. I like to say I'm still looking for a good job, so I just keep coming back to work every day. Started in the mailroom a long time ago, and now I have one of those fancy corner offices. Um, that young lady is my one and only granddaughter, Audrey, soon to be the valedictorian of daycare, the best we could figure out. Very bright young lady. Her parents are, one of her parents is a psychoanalyst, and the other one is a psychology professor at Wake Park in downtown Pittsburgh here. So as my mother likes to say, they don't have a child, they have a little student, and everything everything is a lesson for her. So anyway, that's it. I've been around for a bit. I'm going to give you a very short version of 3 different subjects today, and attempt to answer any miscellaneous questions you might have.
Thank you, Mark. So before we get started, what we're going to do here is myself and Mark will take ourselves off the screen so you can kind of focus more on the presentation. So before we start, though, let's go over some housekeeping items. So with all the participants being muted today, what you could do is utilize the chat box. I highlighted it there. It should be on your toolbar. That's how you can ask your questions. Make sure you have it pulled up by clicking that chat icon. And if you could do me a favor, please address the questions to everybody. That just makes sure I can see them as well. Because what I'm going to do is relay the questions to Mark once the presentation is over. So helps him out. I can keep the questions organized. Also, if you could do me the favor, just hold your questions to the end, because then we will have a Q&A at the end of the presentation, and we have time allotted for that. So we want to make sure we answer your questions. If you could, try to keep the questions the more notary questions. If you have more specific motor vehicle questions, that's a great opportunity to utilize our member services team. Give them a buzz. They can do some research for you. But on these types of webinars, sometimes it's hard to research motor vehicle questions right on the spot. So other than that, I think we're good to go on housekeeping. So before we start, I would like to go ahead and actually poll the audience with a poll here. So I'm going to launch it on the screen. What it's going to say is, are you registered with the Department of State as an electronic notary right now? Take about 20, 30 seconds for me, please, and let me know if you are registered. Give about another 10 seconds just to play it safe. All right, that's our 30 seconds. So let's go ahead and end the poll and get an idea. I will share the results. So we got a mixed room here today. We had 63% of the room saying yes, they are registered. And we have 38% of the people are saying no, they're not registered. So that gives us an idea of the audience and who we're talking to and maybe how experienced you are. So thank you for sharing that. I'm going to stop sharing the poll. So if it's still on your screen, feel free to click on the little close button on the right-hand corner of that poll. It should get it off your screen. So again, thanks for participating. So what we're going to do now is start with the presentation. So Mark, go ahead and take it over from here.
Thank you, John. Thank you very much. It's very interesting to see the numbers. Basically 2/3 are working with Ron and 1/3 are not. In preparation of this presentation, I made an inquiry to the state notary appointing authority, the Secretary of State's office, to see if they could give me their current number of electronically enabled or electronically registered notaries public. It's important to note that the state of Pennsylvania does not keep a separate list of remote online notaries public. They have a combined list of both what was now called IPEN, in-person electronic notarization. Somebody like me, I was the first in-person electronic notary back in, what was it, January of 2006, if I remember correctly. And so that just means that I could sit across the counter here from John, and we could use a computer, my iPad as an example, and we can facilitate a notarization electronically between us. And then eventually, of course, we got into the remote online notary process. But for your curiosity, the state says that there are 2,137 out of about 75,000 notaries public in Pennsylvania who have registered in some way, shape, or form to be an electronic notary public. Again, I don't know how many are remote, neither does the state. The other thing that we took a little list here, we took the list that they sent us, and for your curiosity, there are actually 4 counties, Cameron, Forest, Snyder, and Sullivan counties that don't have any electronic notaries registered at all. But of course, those are also counties with a pretty small population generally. Around the country, we did a survey, maybe about a few years ago now, for a national presentation that I was giving. In round numbers, there are about 4.4 million notaries public in the United States. For your curiosity, a few states, Texas and Florida, each have 400,000 notaries public. So we only have 75,000 here. But we took a survey of all the states to try to find out how many electronically enabled notaries public there were. Some states do parse out the number of RON notaries compared to what's now called the IPEN, the in-person notaries public. But at round numbers, we were able to get a count of 50,000 across the country who had at least signed up to be a remote online notary public. There are about 60 vendors around the country. In Pennsylvania, last time I looked at the Secretary of State's website, I think there's about 35 that we had here in Pennsylvania, 35 approved vendors. It's kind of calmed down. I remember when there were just 2 or 3 vendors for the whole United States, and then it picked up, especially during COVID, when folks couldn't travel and be in front of a notary any longer. And then it reached this sort of peak of 60 and kind of stopped there. Since it's reached the peak, some things have changed. A few of the vendors have gone out of business. A number of the vendors have merged or been bought or sold themselves, if I may. About 9 or 10 of them actually have merged or bought or sold themselves to a larger business. And we'll talk a little bit more about this later on. But while there may be 35 RON vendors in the state of Pennsylvania that you could choose from, the truth is that many of them are involved pretty much in one market vertical, which is the real property industry and the recording of documents in the public record at the county seat. And so there's a very small number of RON vendors that you can actually choose from. And we may get into that as time permits. I guess we go to the next slide then. John, you're doing that, I think. No, he is indeed. Okay, so let's talk about a few basic laws that permit us to be electronic notaries, public. The first one is a state law called UETA, Uniform Electronic Transactions Act. 49 of the 50 states have UETA. One state, New York, has a law which is similar. It's called ESRA, the Electronic Signature and Records Act. It's close enough to the foundation of UETA that they haven't passed their own UETA in their state. And as the slide says, it establishes legal equivalence. So whatever you did with a wet ink signature, a ballpoint pen, even a pencil, although using the pencil as a notary is usually not recommended, but still, whatever you did with the one end of the pen or the pencil or Sharpie or something, you're now going to use the other end, the blunt end that has no ink in it, to make a signature. We'll talk a little bit about that as we go on here. It also provides, as we say here, a legal framework for electronic commerce transactions. That's a whole different conversation, which we'll not get into too much today. I do want to mention now, and I may mention it twice, we'll see how we go here, but nobody, no citizen of the state of Pennsylvania can be forced to do something in an electronic format if they feel uncomfortable about it. There are many folks, including some folks that I know, who, while they understand that you have the ability to sign something electronically, they don't want to sign what they will consider important documents or corporate documents or business documents, call it what you want. They don't want to do that electronically. They still want to use a wet ink signature for reasons good to them. So nobody can force anybody else to sign something electronically. Certainly make the recommendation. A few other points here, that a signature which is executed electronically or a document which is executed electronically cannot be denied legal effect because it's an electronic form. You know, the electronic age is pretty young. It's only 24 years old now. And that might seem like 24 years, might seem like a long time ago for some of you, but it really isn't. When it comes to the adoption of new technology in the United States, whether it's electronic signatures, notarization, recording the public record, electronic wills, which is now slowly but surely gaining some traction, electronic motor vehicle titling, which folks are talking about now, and other electronic things, which I'm forgetting about this morning. Generally, you're looking at a 10 to 20 to 30-year time frame before the public is comfortable with the new technology and will accept the use of that technology. So because you've gone from paper, a tangible, something you could hold and feel, and wet ink to an electronic document or signature, something you can't hold or feel, see on your computer, does not mean the legal effect is any less because of that. Another issue has popped up is that many of the laws in Pennsylvania and other states were written, well, a long time ago. You know, the first notary in Pennsylvania was appointed in 1791. The first notary in this country was appointed in Connecticut in 1639. So there are many, many laws on the books in our state which say that a record has to be in writing. And when those laws were written prior to the year 2000, when UETA took effect, when that took effect, those old laws were still in the books. They still are on the books. So there are many laws that say that something has to be in writing, but if it's electronic, that's okay. We covered that and that. Let me take a look, make sure something else. Same thing for a notary. When UETA was passed, and there's a federal law that also governs electronic signatures called e-sign, which we won't get into today. It's another hour conversation. Both the federal law and the state law, UEDA, and then, as we have here on the slide, Pennsylvania's notary law, RELONA, they all say the same thing. They all say that whatever you did as a notary public in the paper world, using a piece of paper, some way, shape, or form, in a wedding signature, whether you were, whatever you were notarizing, whether you were acknowledging an instrument, whether you were verifying something which is made under oath, it used to be called an affidavit, still is on many forms, an affidavit, and so forth. That requirement that it be in writing, in wet ink, in paper, is met with the electronic laws that are now in force in Pennsylvania. And there's a few laws we're not talking about today, but electronic recording documents, the public record, and other things are coming down the pike. So when you've gone from paper to wet ink signature to electronic, that's okay. And I think I already mentioned that. Now, with RELONA, John, do me a favor, go back, please, for a slide there. Thank you. So first, I want to mention our practical guide on the left-hand side of your screen. That is, if I could use the expression, the Bible of the business in Pennsylvania. We write the practical guide. All of our members have it in some way, shape, or form. You should. It has in the back of it a copy of the current Pennsylvania law. It has some proposed regulations, which will show up at some point. It also has copies of both the federal and the state electronic signature acts. And so if anybody has any questions about those laws and how it all works, our practical guide is the source that you go to. We actually provide these to the Secretary of State's office, the appointing authority, so they know what we are teaching our members and make sure that the state's appointing authority and the Notary Association, that we're all on the same page. The RELONA then has been amended a few times since it was adopted by a group called the Uniform Law Commission back in 2010. And the amendment, of course, added remote online notarization to make RON legal in Pennsylvania. RON is legal in most states now. I think the count is around 47, if I remember correctly. It's a little complicated. For instance, California now permits remote online notarization, except that probably doesn't take effect until 2030. I wish I was trying to be funny here, but I'm not. It's a very complicated process in California. But in most other states, it's accepted, and something which is executed, a document which is executed by RON, should be accepted by folks in the other 49 states, the District of Columbia, and the 6 other areas that the United States controls in one way, shape, or form. The thing that has changed, of course, one of the things is the evidence of identification. How do you identify somebody remotely? You still have to have personal appearance, except, of course, the personal appearance is going to be over a camera. So the tool has changed when we get to electronic and remote, but the concepts, the other functions that we do, the notary under RELONA, you have to make sure that the customer is willing to participate, their competence to participate, that they have the proper identification, and so on. So RON really grew because of COVID. Before COVID, there were only really 4 states that had RON to any way, shape, or form. Virginia, Montana, Texas, and Nevada, if I remember correctly. And then when COVID showed up, a whole bunch of states passed laws quickly so that their notaries could serve their citizens of their states. And as I mentioned before, we have about 47 or so states now that have RON laws. The RON has not, like I say, the adoption curve, I think is the proper term, has slowed down a bit now. You know, Americans are, you know, a funny bunch. We like to do what we know, and whether it's electronic, this or that, or other things I've changed over the years since I've been around for a long time now. we're very slow to adopt new concepts and new technology because we're very comfortable with what we're doing. And we have found that, one of the reasons the number of vendors has not grown in this country or Pennsylvania is because now that we can appear in front of each other, because people think that COVID is over, which it isn't, but generally the public seems to think that it is, that they're going back to what we know, which is appearing personally before a notary public, showing the notary public a driver's license or a state identification card or something similar, in doing what we are comfortable with. So Ron has stopped, no, it hasn't stopped, it has slowed down a bit, and there's not been a new vendor now for probably about 2 years that I can think of. And I keep careful track of this, I can tell you. The other issue with Ron, of course, is it's not as simple as somebody just walking into your office, you identifying them and having some signatures and making an entry in your journal and so on. You now have equipment that you have to use both in your office and wherever your customer is standing, which could be anywhere in the world, by the way. They don't have to be in Pennsylvania with Ron. They could be anywhere in the whole world. But the customer has to have some I can't talk, technological ability to use this equipment. And that gets to be a problem. Can the customer, from their end of the transaction, using a special platform, because you can't use Zoom, you can't use WebEx, you can't use Teams, you can only use special platforms that are approved by the state in most states. Can the customer, are they knowledgeable enough with technology to make this all work? And that gets to be a bit of a problem, because the technology that you have in your office, and most of you are in an office to some degree today, even if you're working from home, you might be using office equipment. Um, in your office, a lot of you have a technology group. Even here at PAN, we have a few young men who, if I can't make my computer work, because I'm old and don't understand it anymore, I could give them a call and they'll run over and push the right button for me. But when the customer's at home, they don't have the right security in their home. They don't have the right Wi-Fi system. There's a lot of things which go wrong, and it makes Ron difficult to use for some folks. So I think that's where I am on that one. Let's go to the next step, please, John. So, we had a poll that said if you were a Ron notary or not, and 2/3 of you said that yes, I am a Ron notary. Next logical question, of course, is, well, are you actually doing any Ron work at all? Are you doing something? And while you're answering the poll, I will tell you, watching the adoption of electronic this and electronic that over the years, that we have found, and I kind of alluded to, that many people say, oh, cool, new system, and we will buy that or we'll acquire that and we'll start to use that. And then when they get it, their business life changes, their policy changes, their process changes, their attitude changes. And with Ron, they found out, this is going to cost money. We have to change our computer system a little bit, so forth and so on. And we find out that a fair number are not actually using Ron, even though they signed up with the state. It's very interesting to see with our survey, but 50%, cool, 50% yes and 50% no. I would not have guessed that. I would have thought it would have been 1/3 yes and 2/3 no, because that's what we have seen in talking to some of the vendors over the years. And in fact, in getting ready for this presentation, I did talk to a few vendors that I know. I know most of them actually. And I'll just read two comments. I won't name the vendor, of course, but I had two comments. One comment was that most notaries don't know exactly how to make Ron work. I'm paraphrasing here slightly. And they have a hard time selling the concept to a customer. So if you have somebody who's not familiar, who only sees a notary once in a blue moon, frankly, most folks only come to a notary maybe once a year if they're lucky outside of the business environment. And so you have to say, well, yeah, we can do this electronically. And there's a certain sales pitch you have to give to promote the concept, and that doesn't always go over. I also asked them, uh, a question on what one of the vendors had sent me an email the other day and said that they had a 30% month-over-month growth. That's a quote. Well, that's good for them. I'm glad that that's working well, but not everybody agrees with the number. And the other vendor that I spoke with said that they've seen a few notaries who've been very successful with Ron, but in general, they said that the industry is leveling out, not really growing. Okay, so that's a little bit today on Ron. The next subject we're going to talk about is your driver's license or your customer's driver's license. There is a movement afoot, as they say, in this country to put your driver's license on your smartphone. Each one of these subjects today is worthy of an hour presentation all by itself. So we're going to give the short version today just to give you a high level idea of what's going on out there. One of the reasons I'm doing this is because all of the states which surround Pennsylvania, so with one exception, their citizens are already using their driver's license on their smartphone, whether it's Android or Apple. So Delaware, Maryland, New York, Ohio, they all have programs where a mobile driver's license, which also, by the way, the abbreviation for it is an MDL, little m, capital D, capital L, an MDL. And I'm mentioning this to you because a citizen from Delaware, Maryland, New York, Ohio could appear before you and show you their driver's license on their smartphone. And you're going to say, what? We never saw that before. We haven't heard anything about it. So at least you'll hear about it a little bit. And I'll give you, again, a very short version of what's going on around the country, what's going to happen here in Pennsylvania. By the way, I didn't mention New Jersey, but New Jersey has legislation pending to enable that for New Jersey also. In the United States right now, there are around 15 or so states that have MDLs, as they're called. And some states have started and actually stopped their program. Oklahoma and Florida, as an example, spooled up a program for this concept, but they decided they weren't really ready for it. There's many reasons and a long conversation about all of this another day. So their programs are on hold at the moment. We have spoken to the state appointing authority in Pennsylvania, our Secretary of State's office, because we need to know whether you as a notary public may accept the driver's license on a smartphone. If I walk into your office and you ask for my identification, I'm going to hold this up because, it's new technology and I'm all proud of myself and I got one of these. Cool. And can you take that? We don't have a response back yet, which is fine. Our law in Pennsylvania, our vehicle code is going to have to be changed to permit this concept. And there was a bill in the legislative session, which just ended here in the middle of November. So we'll start a new 2-year legislative session in January. But there was a House bill which was going to promote this and get the state to adopt it. I haven't heard anybody who objects to it, frankly. I expect that during the next section that it will be put into the hopper, as they say again, and I expect it to pass without too many issues, although I'm glad to talk about any details you want to talk about. So eventually you're going to see it. But here's something else to remember, and that is in the states, not only the states which surround us, but all the states now that have it in this country that have an MDL, the citizen is still required to carry their driver's license. I say the word plastic, although that's a pretty generic word. The polycarbonates is one of the technical terms, and there's other terms to describe a driver's license or another unexpired government issued identity document. So you will have it eventually. And by the way, this is just not a picture of your driver's license on your smartphone. It's not like you can lay it on your desk and take your picture. A few states have tried that, most notably Louisiana, but that's not really what an MDL is. An MDL is pretty complicated. It involves, in fact, we're going to probably show, I think, a few charts here. It is pretty complicated. It involves some pretty serious technology, which we won't talk about. Most people don't know and don't care about it too much on a practical basis. So we'll wait for legislation. I am in touch with with PennDOT and with the Bureau of Driver Licensing. I know the lady who's in charge of that, and the gentleman who's the director of the Bureau of Driver Licensing. So, and the young lady who is working with them. So we do stay in touch with PennDOT on all of this. Once we get a law here that passes and we get some rules on how to use it, Pan will be providing information in our monthly newsletter and with our social media. I'm sure we'll be holding a much longer webinar just in that one subject and talking about it at our mandatory seminars that all notaries public, including yours truly, have to take before you renew your commission every 4 years. So we'll be working on this. I think that's it. John, you can go to the next slide, please. So let's go back just a little bit of history. I borrowed this with permission from my friends at the American Association of Motor Vehicle Administrators. This group is commonly called AMVA. AMVA is not only a national, but international, if you consider Canada, which is certainly not, certainly another country. People don't think about Canada as international very often, but they are. So it is a group of all of the American states, territories, what have you, District of Columbia, and all of the Canadian provinces. And this trade association provides to the states ideas on motor vehicle titling, driver licensing, driver safety, the commercial driver license program, and there's a long list of things which they do. And so I've been a member for a long time. I go to their conferences, a few of their conferences every year around the country. And this was, this slide showed up given by a gentleman that I know who is their chief identity person. And how long have we been doing this? Well, back to 1840, a long time, longer than you ever imagined. Hard to believe that Social Security cards have been around for such a long time, but they have been. California eventually put a picture. I remember mine. I got my driver's license in June of 1966, and it was a little yellow card, and there was no picture on it. And supposedly I could drive. Then in 1977, we started to see databases of these identification credentials. And that's really interesting because up until the middle or late 70s, we called these things, driver's license. The first driver's license was issued in Pennsylvania. Gee, I used to know, maybe around 1923, maybe a little earlier. It was actually a metal stamp thing that you wore on your lapel if you were if you drove a car for somebody else. You could find these things on Google if you take a look. But in the 70s, there started to be, with the advent of computers and what have you, databases of driver licenses. And there's been a lot of conversation over many years. Is this a device which shows that you have the permission to drive? But they also turned into identification credentials. A whole other can of worms, I can tell you. Something else I spend a great deal of time on now, and we'll talk about a little bit this morning about where identification is going. So you can see it 24 years ago, AMVA published a driver license identification card standard that the states should follow. They don't have to, but they are suggested standards. And then, of course, you've probably heard too much of this about the Real ID Act. And many years ago, all of us were supposed to have Real ID, which means you had a little star at the top corner of your driver's license. And now, yet again, the federal government says that as of May of 2025, if you don't have Real ID, you might not be able to get on an airplane or get into certain federal offices and buildings and so forth. We'll see what happens. There's still the majority of the country has Real ID, but that majority is a very small majority. I think the last number I heard was only 57%. So there's a lot of work needs to be done to get everybody else up and running for Real ID. So that's a short version of identity. John, if we go to the next slide, we'll talk about how this works. So MDL works generally like this, and this is an easy slide. You can get much more complicated than this, but I need something which I can understand. So You have at the top of the screen an issuing authority. So in every state, the state driver licensing bureau, or wherever they call themselves, because there's different names. There's one state, I think it's Illinois or Indiana, maybe, where the Secretary of State issues driver's licenses, much to my surprise. Anyway, the states issue a driver's license, and they issue a driver's license, the issuing authority, after they've identified you to their satisfaction, country, but it matters not. They are the issuing authority. And of course, we use a driver's license now for many, many different things beyond driving. So the issuing authority then provides you and I now if you excuse me, a plastic driver's license. So we're the holder of the driver's license. So at the bottom left-hand corner of the slide, it says MDL. So instead of a plastic driver's license, the issuing authority is going to send to you electronically over the airwaves, however that happens, or through a landline and to your cell phone, to your smartphone, a representation of your driver's license. It's very interesting. There's a lot of technology behind all of this. As I mentioned before, it's not just a picture of what they have in their database in Harrisburg. It is bits and bytes, as they say in the computer world. It's data which is going to your smartphone. What's interesting about the data is this. If you take your current Pennsylvania driver's license and a piece of paper and a pen and put it on your desk and take a look and start counting all the little separate data points on the driver's license. As an example, it's going to have one. There's my picture. In fact, my picture's on there twice. My address is on there. The date my driver's license was issued, the date my driver's license expired, the fact, do I have to wear glasses or not, and so on. There are many data points on the front and back of that driver's license. This is very relevant here now. And so I sat down one day, I took a count, and I counted 35 different data points on the front and back of my driver's license. And there's probably others which I don't know about because there's all kinds of security features which the government doesn't tell us about. And that's fine. We understand why. When you have an MDL, a mobile driver's license, I have seen in other states from some of the vendors who are doing this work, 60 or 65 different data points. And one of the questions which comes up is the security of all of this, because we all know that computers get hacked and what have you. There's also a distinct advantage, and this is a little bit of a cliche, but I'm going to use it because you'll hear this a lot, especially once this starts. And that is, say that if I may, you're a young lady and you're going to a bar and you want to go to the bar and you have to get identified at the front door to make sure you're of age. The gentleman at the bar, using loosely sometimes, is going to take a look and say, well, yeah, you're Mary Jane and your driver's license says, you were born at a certain date, so I know you're whatever, 35 years old. With the problem with that is now the gentleman at the bar, at the door, not only does he know how old you are, which he probably doesn't care about that much, but now he knows where you live because he's seen the front and back of your driver's license. And maybe when you get home tonight at 2 o'clock in the morning after the bar closes, you might have an uninvited guest in your front yard. And I'm not being funny. This stuff happens. License, you can. There's a more. You can control who sees what data on your driver's license in what environment. And in fact, when you show up at the bar with your MDL and you show your phone to the young man at the front door, not only will he not even see he won't see your name, he'll see your picture. He won't see your age either. He might just see a little green check mark that shows up that says you're of age, you're over 18 or you're over 21. Now, how does he do that? So the third part of this slide is at the bottom right-hand corner. The gentleman at the bar is going to have probably just a cell phone, frankly, or a specialized reader. And you will hold your cell phone close to his reader, maybe his cell phone, and there'll be maybe a Bluetooth connection or a QR code connection or something. And the reader then will determine, well, if you will, take that information in a manner of speaking, out of your cell phone and take a look and see whether you're of age, and then produce that check mark that says it's okay. Uh, this is very important. What happens if you get stopped by a police officer? The police officer, of course, now you hand over, not that I've ever been stopped, but yeah, I've heard stories about that. That you hand over your driver's license, your insurance card, and your registration card. With an MDL, you're not going to do that. The fact police officer doesn't want to touch your driver's license or your smartphone, I should say, but they will have a reader, maybe a smartphone, or maybe something specialized for the police, and they will take a look using their device, and they'll know how old you are you authorized to drive that kind of vehicle, so forth and so on. Uh, what's nice about this for the state and for you too is that if you, for instance, if you don't renew your driver's license on time, somebody in Harrisburg, in a manner of speaking, could push a button, and maybe a big red X or something shows up on top of your driver's license and says you can't drive any longer. What if your license is suspended or revoked because you were speeding, or you were drunk driving, as an example, and so on? So this enables the state to make changes to your driver's license almost instantaneously. In fact, here's a real life example. A few years ago, I had a cataract operation. So now I'm 20, what is it, 2015, I think, as I could read almost anything without my glasses, but I still wear my glasses. I've been wearing them since I think I was 6 years old. Um, so I went to PennDOT and I said, well, maybe we could take the glasses requirement off my driver's license and I could drive without my glasses. And they did that, but my driver's license doesn't expire for another few years. So now in my wallet, I have my plastic driver's license, and I have if you will, a cardboard, a little piece of paper that I have to carry to show the police officer that I'm no longer required to wear glasses, even though my plastic driver's license says so. With the MDL, that'll all be done almost instantaneously. So go ahead, John, to the next slide. I probably got ahead of myself a little bit here, as I tend to do. So this is pretty much what I just said. The MDL holder, that's you. You hold the driver's license in your smartphone. The app data is requested. Um, the computer, really your phone is a computer. Your phone says it's okay, and the relying party, as they're called. Now, relying parties who? You're a relying party. You rely on identification first and foremost before you act as a notary public. The police officer who stops you is the relying party. If you go to, I still call them state stores. If you go to a state store to buy liquor, that's the cashier is the relying party. Are you old enough? If you go to buy cigarettes at one of the cigarette stores I see around town, no matter how old you are, they still want to see a copy of your driver's license. I don't smoke, but I've seen other people do it, and they're the relying party. Go to the next slide, please, John. So different environments require different information. And so I actually have a lot of this on my smartphone now because I've been trained to use it and I have to teach classes about it and so on. So as you can see, there's at least 4 different methods to connect your smartphone to the phone of the customer who's walking in your door to identify them. Okay, next, John, please. There we go. So there's my sample driver's license. In my case, I am going to show them that I am of age. My address is not there. My driver's license number is not there. There's a whole bunch of stuff that isn't there that nobody needs to see. Okay, we'll get back to that in a second. Next slide, John, please. So as I mentioned, it doesn't replace it. It's not a picture. I choose the data I want to reveal. One of the things which is interesting, which I mentioned at a national meeting that I go to a few years ago, which hasn't been talked about too much yet, but will be, is that as a notary public, if I work at a law firm, what information do I need to see when a customer comes in and I have to identify them as notary? What about when I work in the motor vehicle trade? If I'm a full agent, if I work at a dealership, uh, sometimes if you issue plates, do title work, you have to have a copy of the driver's license. How's that going to work? I don't know yet. I don't know if the PennDOT knows how it's going to work yet either, but it will work. There's no problem there. So the notary law says you can have a current government issued MDL, driver's license. But the law was written some years ago now. And in my opinion, both our law and the laws around the country are going to be amended to say, well, in certain environments, certain information has to be seen by a notary public, but no notary public needs to see all the information. Probably not. Next slide, please. There we go. So I think we talked about there's this, the holder maintains control of the data. So now, in Pittsburgh, we have phone number, my date of birth. That actually is my date of birth. I'm old. Um, and my email address. That's because I decided that's what I wanted to show. Next slide, please. So we can show a whole bunch more information. Um, this just not to confuse you. I know it says UT, that's Utah. That's because it's a sample I got it from. But the class of driver's license I have, the issuing authority, so forth and so on, all kinds of things, including what I talked about before, suspensions. Oh, I forgot interlock status. That's interesting. What if you have to use interlock? So forth and so on. Hardship driver's licenses. Next one, please, John. So what does it mean for you? So it means that you're going to see what you need to see in order to serve your customer. You will know that the data is current, it's reliable, and it's secure. You'll know that they didn't buy that driver's license from, well, I have to say it, from China, because that's where a lot of them come from. It's going to be convenient for customers who are comfortable with technology, and other customers, nobody's going to be forced to do this. It'll be 20 or 30 years before somebody's forced to have an MDL. By then, most of us won't care about it too much. And we believe that there'll be less opportunity for fraud. I understand there are two sides to that story, but we believe there's less opportunity. The next slide, please, John. So it was illegal in Pennsylvania, as I mentioned on the next slide, please. I think. There we go. So it's not enacted yet. It will show up at some stage of the game. Can you accept one from out of state? Not today. You still need the plastic one, but we are working with the state to get a statement which we can send to all of our members and to all the notaries that says it'll be okay. There's a long list of advantages and disadvantages. We're not going to spend time to go through the whole thing. You are going to get if I remember John said, a copy of this, I think is going to be posted on YouTube, and you'll have a chance to review this in more detail. But there's advantages and there are some possible issues. But as I mentioned earlier, this whole thing could easily be an hour presentation or even longer. And I'm happy to talk to any of you about this, either independently or any group that you belong to. Just get in touch. Okay, John, the last part of this presentation then is a short conversation on issues in the electronic world. And where we are going with identity, which is now taking up a great deal of my time. One of the problems right now is fraud in the electronic age. What you'll hear about, if you haven't heard about it, you're going to hear about a lot more in the near future, is real estate fraud, deed fraud. People who are having their homes stolen, and having them stolen because they're impersonating notaries public. Then a long conversation, but it is a bit of an issue in the electronic age. In the electronic age, we're going to have stronger forms of identification. You're no longer going to have that plastic driver's license, which somebody could have taken a razor blade and put a new picture in or changed some of the data and so forth. With the advent of the electronic age, one of the issues, of course, is privacy, and how do you ensure that you have both accessibility to the data and the security of the data. And I actually belong to another group. I mentioned the name is called Cantera. It's an international privacy association. And I can't say that, well, I've been working with them a little bit. Mostly I've been trying to learn from them. If you go to the next slide, please, John. To take a look about how identity is going to be used or developed in the future. Generally in this country, in our state, notaries public are going to see a driver's license, a passport, a state identity card, or some other unexpired, I guess I should say, unexpired form of government identity or a combination of identity. which makes you comfortable that Mark is really Mark when he appears before you. There are some just basic concepts on how identity is working now and in the future. Some of this you've seen because you've maybe signed up for online banking as an example, and some of it maybe you've never heard of before. But there are some three basic concepts which are talked about all of the time. So when you identify somebody, you can identify somebody by a personal trait. In other words, something you are. This is the old cliche three-legged stool that people talk about. If you get all three legs together, you have identity. Well, something you are. And how do we know who you are? Well, I might know who you are by your photograph, by your fingerprint, by a voice print, by a retinal scan, by a facial recognition system, or by any combination of all of these, or some other things too. So first is something you are, something you are. Next, something you know. So for those of you who are Ron notaries, you've been using KBA, knowledge-based authentication, where the customer has to answer 5 questions within 2 minutes and get 80% of them right, I think, if I remember correctly. And so something you know. So a personal identification number, verifiable facts. So I said, well, Mark, where did you live in 1985? And they give you 5 different addresses, and I have to verify the correct address. Biographical data, financial history. LexisNexis, who many of you heard of as a credit agency, is very much into all of this, and they keep track of everything you've done. And what can you tell us? If you use KBA and say, well, Mark, we see you have a mortgage. So it was with this bank, that credit union, or you don't have a mortgage at all. We're just making this up. And they do that just to try to trick you. So financial history. And the third part of the three-legged stool is something you have. Something you have, a smartphone, what is called digital certificates. It's a little piece of software, identification cards, OTP or one-time passwords, text messages. So something you have much more complicated than what we'd be doing just a driver's license or a passport that somebody throws on the desk in front of you. And there's then what is known as, and I'm sure a lot of you are using this now, multi-factor identification. Two or more of these methods combined. And so it's for a lot of folks now, I know you'll get into a website and then you have to click on a link and they'll send you a 6-digit code to your smartphone, and you have to go to your phone and you have to confirm that you got that number, and then you have to take that number and put it into the website. And I know it seems like a real pain in the neck some days, but it is a very effective way of deterring fraud in the electronic age. So the future identity, and also we could do another hour or longer presentation just on that alone. But the basics are how you identify somebody, because something which you are, right, a personal trait, something which they know something which they can tell you to identify them, and something that they have. And they may have all of this by using a smartphone, perhaps, which is where the MDL comes in. And I think, John, that is the end of the formal slides.
It is, Mark. So what I'm going to do now is stop sharing my screen. I'm going to hop back on. Where we go? Back on camera here. Just takes a minute. So here's my lovely face. I think we had 1 or 2 things roll through the chat box. At this time, if you do have questions, please put them in there. We do have a few minutes left here before we close up shop. So we definitely want to answer those questions. Somebody just had a comment when they came in this morning. They just said, thanks for hosting. And a lot of people still don't know about Ron. They don't know it exists. So, yeah.
Maybe it's time to do another. We did a Ron seminar probably a year or more ago, I think.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, I mentioned to John, I came to work a little late today. I had to go to a physician. Nothing's wrong, just the usual stuff. But when he wanted to know what I was going to be talking about, because I said, hurry up, I have to get downtown. And I told him about Ron. He said, oh, Ron. And I explained it to him. He said, that's a great idea. He said, finding a notary is a real pain in the neck. Could you tell me about this? I said, I'll call you up and we could set you up with one of the vendors maybe, and set your notary up so maybe you could do Ron. Anyway.
So Is the mobile ID available in PA?
No, not yet. We have to have legislation passed. So I do expect it to be introduced after when the new session starts in January. I have not heard anybody who's going to vote against it. The only issues that have popped up over the years is really it's with the electronic age generally is that you do have folks who don't have access to smartphones. They can't afford them. They don't want them. They may be too old and don't understand them. They don't care about them. But you have new immigrants. You have folks that don't have enough money to buy or use technology and so forth and so on. So the government still has to give the ability for their citizens to use what is being used right now, and they can't force anybody to go into the new technology at this stage of the game. But no, it will eventually show up, and we'll be back. We'll be back to talk about it.
All right, we got another question. Is there a solution that you would recommend over the others, like the, providers?
Iran vendors. So that has been a problem from day one. Even when there were three or four of them, I knew all of them. Um, First, this association is not affiliated with any one of the vendors. I am loath to say publicly without talking to a notary individually, uh, uh, give any names. I will tell you this, that if you work in real property, I might send you to one vendor. If you're working for a law firm, I might send you to another vendor. If you're just doing this on at night and on weekends to earn a few extra dollars, maybe, then there's a lady in Ohio I'm probably going to send you to. So you have my email address, maronson@notary.org. You have everybody think has the phone number here. You can always welcome to call. That's probably a 10 or 15-minute conversation. As I did mention earlier on, even though there are maybe 30 or 35 listed on the Secretary of State's website, the truth is that many of them are now been taken in-house and that the average notary, me, I couldn't use them if I wanted to anyway. So I probably have three or four, maybe five that I might recommend to you, but that's kind of where it stands.
Awesome. And what I did for everybody is I did put your email in the chat box. So if they do have more detailed questions, they can go ahead and email it to you. Maybe they want a paper trail of your answer, so they could always do it that way as well. Donna said, thank you. You're welcome. We still have a few more minutes. If you have any more questions, feel free to uh, to drop them here in the chat box. What I'm doing here is, and before we wrap up, I always do a plug for Google reviews. Pan's always looking for them. This is how people find us, become members for our education, for our services. So if you haven't done so already and you like, dislike, whatever it is about us, please let us know on Google. We would greatly appreciate it.
Gee, John, whatever happened to the Better Business Bureau? Oh, well, anyway, things change.
Yeah, it's Google now. Yeah, think about it. I go out to dinner or lunch and I'm looking up reviews. That's what I do.
Yeah, but how do I know that what you like is what I like and I never
That's very true. Somebody just gave us a shout out. They said, I love what Pan does for PA notaries. Thank you. We appreciate that. You are welcome.
This webinar is a good example of what you don't see. I spend much of my time going to meetings around the country or spending time on conference calls and so forth, getting ready for the future. And that's what this conversation was about. Things that are going to happen a month, a year, 2 or 3 years down the road, so that when it does happen, we're able to inform our members and give them information they need to better serve their members, their customers.
We do have one more question and then we'll wrap up here. Are raw notarizations for real estate only for PA properties?
No, the answer is no. So Ron is being used around the country for all types of environments, and they are certainly acceptable. Again, if somebody wants to call me and talk about it, your situation, I'd be glad to, because if you think listening to me for an hour has been a long time, I could spend an hour probably just on that one question. So I'm sorry, but the life is made out of details, many, many small details. It's really what makes this association go. And I'll be glad to talk to whoever that was in whatever detail you wish, or your employer or your lawyer, anybody. My pleasure.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Mark. No more questions rolled through the chat box here. So what I'm going to do now is just thank everybody for stopping by. We will have a replay on our YouTube page within the next few business days. So keep a lookout for that if you want to refer back to it as at any point. We've got some thank yous rolling through the chat box. You are welcome. We appreciate it. And thanks, Mark, for giving us some time today on this topic. And hopefully we can do some more PAN webinars with Mark, the president here. And so if you have a topic you want us to talk about, throw it in the chat box, email us. We'll be glad to take a look at it and see what we can do for you guys. So, somebody said wait. So there might be one more question rolling through, Mark.
Sure, sure.
We got time.
That's okay, John. I got lunch tomorrow. Don't let that bother you.
uh,
Yeah, I'll wait. It's okay.
Cybersecurity. They
Yeah.
just gave a question. They just said cybersecurity, so maybe they're going to be typing the question on it.
There was cyber security insurance. Uh, Again, so
I need your rep's contact for cybersecurity.
I think what you need to do is send me an email, please, with your phone number and let me call you back and we can talk about this.
Absolutely. And again, I'll put Mark's email in here so you have it.
Yeah, different environments are going to require different levels of security and different policies and so forth. So
Awesome. Well, that is our hour. We were scheduled till noon. So what we'll do now is wrap it up. Thanks everybody for being here. We'll see you next time. Stay safe, stay healthy, and happy holidays, everybody.
happy holidays indeed. Thank you very much. Have a good day.
See you guys. Bye.